One of the most challenging things on this journey of trying to deconstruct my own racism is learning to forgive myself. That is a very difficult thing to do for most anybody, especially when it's a burden that you carry around so heavy that you don't know how to break it down. Again, these are my thoughts, my experiences, and my opinions only. And while I can't tell you how to learn to forgive yourself for something because it's different for everybody, it's absolutely crucial if you want to grow. I had to admit it to myself. I had to be accountable to myself. And then I had to put in the work. And that involves a lot of introspection, a lot of prayer. It's just something you can't take your foot off the gas of. You know what I mean? Forgiving myself doesn't absolve me of the things I've got to work out. Not by any stretch of the imagination. But until you forgive yourself, it's really hard to move forward. And the biggest thing I struggle with initially is what we call white guilt. And that looks different to probably everybody. Because I was really concerned. I spent a lot of time thinking about it and praying about it. Because if I did this out of some sort of guilt, it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be sincere. And I realized and came to the conclusion, once I'd forgiven myself, that I had thrown that yoke off me. Now I'm just free to love. I'm just free to grow and be open-minded and experience all these new things with an open and transparent heart. Racism is not a switch you can flip on and off. It doesn't work that way. It's a long process. It takes a lot of commitment. And in part 4, I'll talk about what does racism look like to a racist. Have a great day.
You would not have to feel white guilt if y'all would fix what you did. You meaning your ancestors. If white people collectively would sit down and try to at least try to reverse the centuries and centuries and centuries of colonialism, bigotry, and racism, you would not have to feel guilty anymore. Problem solved. Because that's really why we're in this mess to begin with. Because a selective group of white people cannot bear to feel guilty anymore. They cannot feel the white guilt. They can't handle the white guilt. You aren't your ancestors, but you are burdened with the responsibility to fix what they did. But of course, that would mean having to share your spot at the top with everyone else, which again is not acceptable because y'all haven't known anything else. Because y'all keep running from history instead of facing it, we will continue to ride this oppression roller coaster until y'all become the minority. Because it is inevitable. It will happen. Desperately trying to ignore centuries of colonialism, bigotry, and racism isn't going to just make it go away. I don't care how many immigrants you try to deport. I don't care how many black people you try to kick out of your jobs and schools. I don't care how many Black History Months you try to cancel. White supremacy is not sustainable. It's not going to last forever. Y'all are already the global minority. Okay? I'll end this video saying this. The entire world sees how desperate you are to get rid of anything that is not straight and white. And it's not because you are strong. It's because you are weak. Extremely weak. Like I said in a video before, without minorities, this country would be the weakest it has ever been. Y'all will not win this race.
White guilt is one of the most interesting sensations in the world because white guilt led to more white people being involved in a civil rights movement for black people than any point in this nation's history during 2020. But white guilt also motivates anger and led to that same year the 60% rise in hate crimes against African Americans. But you see, we don't want you to feel guilty because I want you to think about it. White guilt does nothing for me and mine. You can literally find white guilt back to this nation's foundation. Founding father Thomas Jefferson, who was both a slave owner but somebody who considered himself to be an abolitionist, once said, "There is not a man on this earth who would sacrifice more than I would to relieve us from this heavy reproach. We have the wolf by the ear, and we can neither hold him nor safely let him go. Justice is in one scale and self-preservation in the other." Basically, that quote is Thomas Jefferson lamenting his own guilt and sadness in the horrors of slavery, but his own fear of letting it go in turn of what might happen to him. So white guilt is not new. White guilt is a creation of white consciousness and a battle within white consciousness. It's your brain in a state of cognitive dissonance that if what people like me are saying is true, if what the black activists and organizers are saying is true, the black historians, the black politicians, the black leaders, and just your average black people, if what we are saying is true, then how do you cope with the reality that the values you were raised on and the narrative you've been told is all a lie? That your success your ancestors' success is marked in the blood and the bones of my people. And that sucks. And you go, well, this sucks. This shame sucks. What can I do to be a part of making things better? Or you get really angry and you go, no. I can't be ashamed. They want me to be ashamed. They are lying. They are wrong, and what they're trying to do is break our history, break my family, break my success. Or you do what you're doing. You go, yeah, all of that really sucks. But I didn't choose this, and I don't want to feel bad, and I want you to stop making me feel bad, which is a mighty interesting reaction. Do you think that Black people deserve the things that happen to them and are happening to them because they were born that way? We're not asking for your feelings of guilt or your feelings of shame. We just represent a thing you really don't want to have to deal with, but we deal with it every day.
Have you ever wondered if the well-intentioned feeling of white guilt might actually be doing more harm than good? White guilt refers to the feeling of shame or responsibility that some white individuals experience as a result of their perceived role in historical and ongoing racial injustices. This guilt can manifest in a variety of ways, including apologizing for one's whiteness, engaging in performative allyship, or avoiding conversations about race altogether. While the intentions behind white guilt may be well-meaning, it can actually be harmful. First and foremost, it can be patronizing and disempowering to Black people. It reinforces the idea that people of color are victims who need saving rather than agents of their own liberation. It also focuses on the idea that white people commit individual acts of racism rather than acknowledging that racism is a systemic issue that all of us need to work to dismantle. White guilt can be paralyzing. Rather than taking concrete actions to address racial inequality, individuals who feel guilt may become overwhelmed and feel as though there is nothing that they can do to make a difference. This can result in a sense of hopelessness and lack of meaningful progress. So, what can we do instead? First and foremost, we need to recognize that feeling guilty about whiteness does not actually solve any problems. Instead, we need to take concrete actions to address systemic racism. This might involve educating ourselves about the history of racism and its ongoing implications, supporting organizations that work to promote racial equity, or having difficult conversations with our friends and family members about race. We also need to be mindful that the ways in which our guilt may inadvertently perpetuate racism. For example, if we are constantly apologizing for our privilege or center conversations around our own feelings of guilt, we are still making the conversation about ourselves rather than about the experiences and needs of Black people. We need to shut up, listen, and learn to the experiences of people of color without dismissing their experiences. While it's important to acknowledge the ways in which our privilege has contributed to systemic racism, we need to be careful not to let that guilt consume us. Instead, we should channel our energy into meaningful conversations and actions that will contribute to a more equitable society for everyone.
I don't have white guilt. I'm not responsible for slavery. I grew up poor too. What about the white slaves? That has nothing to do with me anymore. What color owns most of the corporations? What color has most of the wealth in the Western world? What color has created addictive pharmaceuticals? What color is poisoning our food and deregulating safety measures? What color is dismantling environmental protection? What color is taxing you? What color is outsourcing their labor to other colors in other places? What color is upholding Christian nationalism? What color had the largest empire in human history? What color writes most of our laws? What color makes up the largest amount of welfare recipients? That one may surprise you. I could go on, but my point is, even though most white people are not the most powerful people in the world, all of the most powerful people in the world are white people. So obviously this points to being a class issue, not just a race issue. Race is just a proxy for class. The rich white man has pitted the poor white man against every other color of man and woman. And until the poor white people understand that, we're going to be stuck where we are now, and it's going to get worse.
About racism, anti-blackness, or violence. I will use my voice in the most uplifting way possible. And do everything in my power to educate my community. I will love my black neighbors the same as my white ones.
Talk about white guilt. You know, they make this white guilt seem like it's a religion. Bro, I can't. They got their hands in the air like they're in church. Well, hey, I guess one thing, you know, we can't say that all white people hate black people. This is funny. This is crazy. And the crazy thing is I don't see the benefit of this. It just seems like virtue signaling to me. If you really want to help black Americans, helping us take some accountability would be a good way to start. Because a lot of us right now are severely lacking it. If you want to help black people, stop making excuses for us because we're black. Oh, and let's stop lowering the bar for black people. Hold us to the same standard that we hold everybody else to. Teaching a man to fish is much better than giving a man a fish. And too many people want to give black people stuff right now. And too many black Americans have a standard that is far too low. Anyway, again, this white guilt is crazy. I can't be the only one who thinks this. You guys let me know what you think.
Should white people, or Brahmins for that matter, feel guilty? You know, you see a lot of stuff on the internet, white people do better. These directives don't help. When someone behaves in a racist or discriminatory way, when someone becomes a fascist, it's because they're deeply wounded inside. The only solution is to heal. Not accusation, healing. When you heal, your behavior will change automatically. Second, the survivor's guilt is the other form of guilt that's very, very common among liberals. It's, why am I privileged and they're not? And you hear this rhetoric all the time. Now look, about 2 years ago, a close friend of mine killed himself. And for 2 weeks, I was in hell with him. I was making myself suffer because of survivor's guilt, like I was in that room where he died. Until I realized, how is this helping anyone? It's not. In fact, the best weapon against fascism and the darkness that is now enveloping the world is joy. It's the joy that creates a light, and that light can dispel the darkness over time because everything begins in the mind. Everything begins outside. Guilt is punishing yourself. It's sticking a knife into yourself, which increases the aggregate unhappiness of the world and helps nobody. And guilty people are very dangerous because they're in pain, so they hurt others even.
It sucks to be a white American. Now hold on, give me a chance, let me explain. I want you to think of the kind of person who would put on a White Lives Matter sticker on the back of their Ford pickup. Why do they do that? Is it all racism? Well, yeah. But I think it goes a lot deeper than that. White Americans basically have no culture. Not in the same way we see other people. And we white people, we know this inherently, and it scares us. We know we have our regional cultures. Our cities, our sports teams, and families all give us our regional culture, but being white basically means nothing, or generally at least nothing positive. White people throughout American history are almost always seen on the side of the oppressors. Not all white people, but most of us. And this sucks to learn. It's even harder to internalize. And it's why white people usually don't accept this, because it makes us feel a deep sense of guilt. I think it's why white people say nonsense like, I can't be racist, I have black friends. Sure, you probably don't see black people as objects, but you're refusing to accept the role our people have had in their oppression. That guilt we feel is our responsibility for the actions of our ancestors. It's why white people refuse to say that black people deserve reparation, because it admits our guilt. But black people deserve reparations. It just makes sense logically. You can sue someone for scratching your car, but black people can't sue the American government for the enslavement of their people. My people are arresting and deporting Mexican families from this country. Think about that. We are telling people that they are not allowed on the land we stole. Let's go a step further. White people stole a sacred land site from the people indigenous to this land and then carved 4 white people's faces on it, most of which were slave owners. I mean, Mount Rushmore is a place that we look at and we're like, oh, cool, giant faces. But to other people, it's a giant form of oppression. And admitting that and coming to terms with that sucks. We suck, dude. My people really and truly suck. Not all of us contributed to this oppression, but we are all a part of it. And this will mostly sound like virtue signaling. It will mostly sound like, look at how rough we are. But there is a reality to admitting this guilt and being honest with it. Because white people are afraid to do this. And we're afraid to admit it because my people are weak. White people are weak. We have power we have given ourselves and put down the cultures that are stronger than us because we know that we're weak. If white Americans were oppressed the same way black, native, or Mexican American people are, we would crack like glass. Our culture and identity as white people is so meaningless that we do everything in our power to keep other people down so that we don't break from having someone else on top. I think that's why you see white Americans championing white pride, not just out of ignorance or racism, but it's because they are scared. They're scared to come to terms with their guilt, scared to admit they're wrong, and terrified to acknowledge that we may have all the societal, economic, and political power, but as a people we are weak. But this isn't the way it has to be forever. I have hope that one day my people will finally take responsibility for what we have done. I hope that we'll collectively accept our role in the oppression of our non-white brothers and sisters and finally take action. And it will take the action of us white folks. It's not just non-white people that have to fight for their rights. It's us too fighting for them because our cross to bear is being born white. Being born with the skin color of the oppressors means that we have to fight to be nothing like them. We're not near that right now. America is in a tumultuous stage where it very much does not feel like white people are acknowledging where they went wrong. But I want to have hope, and I refuse to accept that one day justice won't prevail. Collectively, we can all shed the shadow of oppression and share this place together. And that's the message I want to end with. I want to be hopeful that one day oppression will be something taught in history class, you know? Something that we don't have to see ourselves in. That's what I hope. Anyway, I want to be optimistic in the end. Anyway, that's it. Thanks.
White people, specifically white men, that will come into my comments talking about music comes from everywhere. It has no origins. Okay, so where are hamburgers from? Where are french fries from? Where is ketchup from? Where did your family come from? Because you start talking about, oh, they're from Ireland and they're from Britain and I'm 2%, So anything that's not related to black roots or African roots or Caribbean roots, everyone owns it. It's universal. Stop reminding us about the past. Stop reminding us about where it's from. That black people, that African people, Caribbean people actually are the culture when it comes to the US. That y'all have no culture. They want us to forget our history so bad because of their own white guilt and white fragility. It's not gonna work, baby. It's not gonna work. As long as this keeps moving and all of us, oral history will carry us through, written history will carry us through, content will push us through, and you're just gonna have to be watching your receding hairline because that's the big problem you have. That's the most important problem you have. You know what?
White people, did you know that research shows we have less empathy? 2014 study from the National Academy of Sciences, 2017 study from the Social, Psychological, and Personality Science, 2021 study from the Journal of Humanistic Psychology, 2023 study from Harvard that studied over 60,000 participants. All these studies demonstrated that white people feel less empathy, especially towards black people who are suffering. Even the well-meaning white people. As an academic, a lack of empathy is how we excuse harm, how medical bias happens, how police brutality gets minimized, how workplace abuse and gaslighting gets ignored. It prevents white people from changing the systems that are harming the black community. What can us white people do? One, when you feel discomfort because of the suffering of other people, stop trying to come up with some bullshit excuses and learn how to sit with the discomfort and connect to it. Two, believe people when they tell you about their suffering instead of trying to minimize it or justify it. And three, expose yourself to black storytelling. Not just trauma stories, but black stories of joy, of nuance, of complexity. Empathy deepens when everyone is humanized. There's no requirement to feel shame to grow empathy, but there is a requirement to feel something. And I think that's something us white people struggle with. I hope this helps.
So yesterday I posted a video giving a very basic definition in my own words of what white privilege is. And I kept it very brief and vague on purpose because I had a feeling people would start arguing in the comments, which they did. But I also thought it was super interesting how many people were commenting that I have white guilt, that I want to be black, and that I'm dying for the attention of the black community. First of all, yes, I have white guilt. You should too. Anyone who grows up with the knowledge that they have systematic advantages over other people just because of historical events and historical discrimination should feel a little guilty about that. Whether or not they contributed to that is a whole other thing, but you're reaping the benefits of it. People act like white guilt is something to be ashamed of, but if you use it in the right way and you use it to further reduce injustice, it's a good thing. And when people talk about systematic injustice and things like that, and they say, oh, everyone's equal, and this is happening in the comments, there's no racism anymore, everyone's equal, obviously don't understand what systematic means. And I'm going to give an anecdotal story just to really hit this on the head. I am white, and on both sides of my family, we do not have any massive generational wealth. My mom's father is the only one of my 4 grandparents who we got any sort of generational wealth inherited from. And 99% of the wealth that we inherited from my grandfather was from selling his house. My grandfather was born in 1926 in rural North Carolina, and he was a 6'3" white man with blue eyes. And other than being white, my grandfather didn't have that many privileges. He was one of like 7 children. His mom didn't even get to high school level education, and his dad never went to college. They were not privileged in most other ways that we define privilege, but he was a white male in a very, very racist country. What his whiteness allowed him to do was work his way through college. At the time, there were colleges that weren't accepting black people, and he was accepted to college as long as he could pay for it. And he ended up getting a law degree and becoming very successful. And again, never hoarded any significant wealth, but bought a house outside of Washington, D.C. in the 50s. In a neighborhood that was redlined. And actually, my mom, who was born in the 60s, remembers in the 70s when the first black family moved into their neighborhood, because it had literally been sectioned off and realtors would not sell to black families. And my mom, who is 58 years old, went to a year of segregated school. So for all of you saying, it was so long ago, everyone has equal rights now, get over it. My mom remembers when the first black student joined her class in the 70s in Alexandria, Virginia. In 2015, my grandfather died, and we sold his house that he bought for around $100,000 in the 50s, and we sold it for $1 million. That money was divided among his children, and my family was able to get out of a lot of debt, and it completely reset my ability to go to private versus public school, my ability to afford tutors, my ability to become the educated person that I am. And it was all really because I have a white grandfather. Let me finish. Had my grandfather been black and had all of the other skills and background that he had, he couldn't have gone to the schools that he went to. He wouldn't have been hired in the jobs that he was. And he couldn't have bought the house that he did, that, 65 years later, put his family out of debt. So if anyone tries to tell you it's not that deep, it really is that deep. It goes so far back. Any small privilege that a white person has is probably, to some degree, due to their whiteness. And if you are a white person who has roots in the South, you definitely should have white guilt, and you definitely should be doing the work to understand how your privilege affects the people around you and how you can help level the playing field. Because you, almost 100%, have an ancestor who owned black people. So yes, I have white guilt. Yes, I'm aware of my status as a white woman, and I'm aware of the parts of my identity that are privileged and the parts that aren't. But saying that you have a certain type of privilege doesn't mean that you have every privilege. It just means that that aspect of your identity is favored by society. So I can talk about being a white woman, and that makes me privileged. But if I talk about being a woman, that is actually a disadvantage in a lot of ways. And everyone tried to get all particular about these specific situations where a black person might have a privilege or a woman might have a privilege over a man. Those are isolated situations you're bringing up. We're talking about large-scale, mass, systematic issues. And It's a lot deeper than just, oh, I felt racism as a white person at one point. Fine, yeah, all of us can experience what feels like discrimination based on race, but that doesn't mean that it's systematically affecting you and stopping you and your families from catching up. That's really what it is. Now, yeah, legally, black people and white people should have the same exact rights and privileges, but they're playing catch up. Because if my family, like I said, had been black, we would never have gotten out of debt in 2015. I would never have been able to afford the school that I went to and live the lifestyle that I'm living right now. And that's because of effects from over 70 years ago. So thanks for listening. And yeah, white guilt's okay.
So I just wanted to clarify some things about my white guilt video quickly, just because it seems to be gaining a little bit of traction again. So firstly, I just want to shout out this comment and point out that some manifestations of white guilt can in fact be toxic, and that white people should not be seeking validation from people of color in order to appease their own white guilt. But I also just want to point out that when I say I feel a certain degree of white guilt, it's not that I am completely all consumed and wrecked by feelings of guilt every second of every day. Like, that's not what it's about. It's more so me just acknowledging that my ancestors, like the group of people that I come from, did some really fucked up shit in the past, and that I actually unduly benefit from that. When I think about some of the advantages that I have in life, I feel guilty because I know that there's nothing that I particularly did to deserve those advantages as compared to people who may not have them. It's a product of the circumstances I was born into, and I think that's a sign of empathy.
Greetings everyone, welcome back to my channel once again, and if it's the first time that you're coming across my content, I will kindly request that you hit the like, subscribe and share button. And to my returning subscribers, I'd also like to thank you and encourage you to interact with this video through liking, commenting and sharing. Well, in this episode today we are seeing white people reacting to the term white guilt that has been continuously used to describe this sense of responsibility or shame that comes from the action or privileges that the white people usually enjoyed, that is thanks to the racial injustices such as slavery, colonialism, segregation and systemic racism. It is common to see white people feeling this sense of responsibility whereby they display shame and have this sense of guilt that has been ingenuinely referred to as white guilt, whereby they feel responsible for the actions that have led to the discrimination of other races, especially that is in terms of racism. And in this video, you are seeing several individuals coming out to explain why white guilt is an important phenomenon and is making changes that is in the United States, whereby they share a dark history of slavery. And we see the black community mostly being the individuals who were badly affected by this racial discrimination. And in the recent times, you're seeing white people coming out to apologize on behalf of their ancestors, and we are seeing white people joining movements such as the Black Lives Matter to show that they're in full support of the black people and are very sorry for the atrocities that were committed to their ancestors and some of the atrocities that the black community and other colored people in the United States that are considered to be disadvantaged are still experiencing at this point. And with white guilt, the individuals have this collective sense of shame and feelings of remorse for the actions that were committed to the black community. However, not every white individual has this white guilt, as we've seen most cases whereby some whites have been found in a position whereby they are being forced to apologize for things that they say they didn't commit. And actually, some whites are also coming out to say that white guilt won't work on them, as according to history, it's only about 10% of the white population that owned slaves, and the other 90% never had the resources to own slaves, and so they don't see any need to come out and apologize to the black community and the other colored individuals of the United States for the mistakes that were committed by their ancestors. But to some white individuals, this has become a huge deal, and they are trying to cope up with the emotional baggage and trauma that they believe they inherited from their ancestors. And we've actually seen, if you've watched this video, you've seen an instance whereby the whites are also coming out to openly apologize to the black community and other members of the American community for the actions that they've been done to them. As currently, despite of the fact that slavery was abolished almost 100 years ago, we are getting to see that the systemic racism and the systemic discrimination is still being experienced by the black community. A good example is the police brutality that is a very common occurrence in the United States, and whereby you get to see that most police officers usually have this mentality or have this automatic idea that any black individual found in the streets is a threat and should be neutralized at any given point. And in this case, you also find out that the black community members, also knowing that they are easy targets for the police, in instances whereby they get to have an encounter with the police, is a very common occurrence for them to try and flee from the scene. And this has resulted in large cases of executions by the police. And we see the black community members identifying this condition as a form of discrimination. And due to this, again, we are seeing white individuals who are against this and are against racism, as they usually believe that racism is a taught concept and no one is actually born a racist. And it's quite a good move as more and more white people are coming out to educate themselves about the negative impacts of racism and trying to integrate that peace and sense of harmony back in the communities that they stay. And with this comes with the complete overhaul of the stereotype that has been commonly branded to the black community. And again, opening chances to individuals of the black community and other people of color strictly based on their competence and not the color of their skin. And so white guilt is actually playing a very good role, that is in ending racism. But again, not everyone agrees with this idea. Well, share your thoughts with me in the comment section. And thank you once again for watching this episode. See you in the next one.